We're like live. Isn't that funny that it gives us our own doorbell? Like you've arrived. I feel like that's genius, actually.
Yeah. All right. I feel welcome.
Yeah, welcome to the thing that you invited everybody else to. I'm going to actually lock our room really quickly as well. Zoom has had some interesting issues, so we're going to lock the room, and there we go. So now,
Okay.
welcome. We're here. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the chat, the teaching today. And I've invited Bryan Colter over to the Cyber House, and we've got beverages and snacks and astrology for you guys today, which is going to be a load of fun. So welcome, Bryan. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, we were talking and we've been talking, it's been what, just about 6, 7 months since we've kind of been acquainted, I think. And we both have mercurial charts. So there's a lot of talking that's going to happen today, friends.
Yeah. Collectively, we're jabberjaws.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
two different ways, which I think is such a fun expression of Mercury. I'm like very fast and I'm like, let's go.
Yeah.
You're
And
like,
my Mercury is in Capricorn and it's a little bit more slower.
it's like well paced. So good. So today we're going to talk about the nodes. We're going to talk about the nodes and what they are. We're going to talk about them in a birth chart, and we're actually going to do some chart reading today towards the end of this. And we're also going to talk about the transiting nodes. We're getting ready to have them shift signs from Cancer to Capricorn. So we'll talk about what that was like globally and personally. And also we're moving to Gemini Sagittarian axis. So we'll talk about what that means and how we can use that as well. So, but before we jump in, some housekeeping notes. You can still get signed up for the 65,000 subscriber gift courses. And if you haven't seen it yet, it's a big yellow tag that's out there. You can come to the website, and I will be teaching along with my astrology students from 101, 102, and personal sessions. And we'll be teaching 4 different sessions in May on the basics of astrology. So come join us. It's fun. It's going to be a fun gift, and they'll be talking, because that's what mercurial people do, is we talk.
Indubitably.
Indubitably, we talk. Yay. So, Bryan, can you tell us, just in case anybody hasn't met you, which when I put up that we were doing a video together and teaching together, people were like, yes. So that is good news. But for anybody who doesn't know you, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself real quick?
Yeah. My name is Bryan Colter. I'm an evolutionary astrologer. I studied with Stephen Forrest. I've been practicing for about, 5 or 6 years professionally. I finally, about a year ago, got the bravery of coming on and making a YouTube channel. And the rest is kind of history. Here I am. I have a lot of planets in the 5th house of creativity, a lot of Leo energy in my chart too. I said I better get on with this creative self-expression thing, even though with my Virgo moon is highly uncomfortable. But here I am. I'm doing my deep spiritual work. So
Here we are.
yeah.
That's so awesome. And it was great. So just, I don't know, not too long ago, Bryan reached out and he's like, do you want to do a collaboration sometime? And I'm like, yes. That's the kind of the benefit too of doing the spiritual work, is you kind of find your tribe buddies. You could just have like kind of an instant connection and go, oh yeah, I don't even know what we're going to do, but it's going to be great. So here we are.
Yes, we shared, our birth information, obviously, because we're astrologers and we can get the inside scoop. And when I looked at our collective synastry, I was like, oh, this is going to go well. So.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? That is how astrologers work. In case you guys ever wanted to know, we really do trade birth chart information when we meet. It's so romantic.
Let's soul gaze right away before we talk about anything. Yeah.
All right. So let's jump in here and let's talk about the nodes. Now, if you've never heard about the nodes, first of all planets have nodes, but typically when you're listening to an astrologer talk about nodes, they're talking about the nodes of the moon. And the way that those are interpreted in different types of astrology are some perspectives that you'll maybe hear today. But kind of the baseline idea that I work with the nodes is that in the natal chart, they are really these 2 different opposing positions. Both are needed, but they both tell us something different about what we're doing. that transiting or that natal north node is the one we're kind of growing towards. And sometimes you'll hear it talked about as the dragon's head, like this is where you're going, take that heavy head and go this way. And it's hard, it is complicated because we're not good at it yet. Whereas that south node, these are the default positions, lessons, behaviors, attitudes that we have. So we tend to want to fall back and use those. And that usually creates a little bit of problem for us, right? Because we're trying to grow into a different set of lessons. So that south node holds a past story and past behaviors for us, but we're trying to kind of undo that a little bit and go in a different direction. So it's neat. The way I work with them and the way that I look at them in a natal chart is I want to know those first, because I'd like to know what's the real work that you're here to do. And the rest of the chart will fold in nicely to help me guide you to get that work done by which tools you're going to use. So that's the way that I work with them. But let's hear how you work with them, Bryan.
Pretty much the same. And I love the way you said you look at the nodes first when you look at their chart. You know, I do that too. You know, it's like if I'm preparing for a birth chart reading, I analyze the nodes first. And even though in the reading, I usually present the nodes last. So I kind of do it opposite in terms of how I'm studying the chart and then the presentation part of it. But it's so, so important to understand the direction of the person. It's a beautiful polarity point in the chart. And it's from the evolutionary astrology perspective, it's basically the same thing. The south node represents past, habitual energy, been there, done that kind of energy. And then the north node is kind of the medicine for that. It's the opposite polarity point, but it's farthest from us. It kind of feels hard to reach. But we put a little spin on it, and we actually weave it into a semi-fictional past life story. We use the reincarnational model with this work. And the general, I guess you could say the bedrock philosophy of evolutionary astrology in terms of why we're all here is to do just that, is to evolve. So that's how I use evolutionary astrology, whether I'm doing a birth chart reading or a transits reading or a past life reading. I'm always trying to understand, okay, how can we take the symbolism that we're working with here, these main archetypes that are emphasized in your life and in your past life, and how can we apply them to our lives and transcend just the descriptive form of astrology into prescriptive, and the goal being to put our personal growth and evolution into hyperdrive. And then we look at the nodes, and you know, as I said, and you said, south node is kind of like past, habitual energy, programming. And we just, instead of just saying past, we just add an extra word, past life, you know, and then create a parable that parallels past life experience. So we can start to understand, firstly, what it must have felt like to be you in the past life, which tends to carry over into the current life because classically history repeats itself, kind of like soul echoes or soul reverberations. So we want to understand, okay, what does it feel like to have a Capricorn south node? And then also, what the heck were you learning in the past life? And so we have a bit of a kindergarten through 12th grade here to put it simply. On planet Earth, the school of hard knocks. And of course, being a ninth grader is no better than being a second grader, just a different lesson plan. But by looking at the past life story, I want to get an understanding of what the lesson plan is. I don't know the answers to the test, but I think we can get a good sense of the curriculum.
Sure.
And then the north node being the antidote to that. And of course, we all suck at our north nodes because they're opposite from where we've come from. So they're really hard to reach. But you know, if you do, you'll get an A+ in this incarnation, so to speak, and you'll be able to graduate and move on to the next lesson. You know, that's my take on it anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, Bryan and I both share the same north and south node placements in Cancer and Capricorn respectively. So we were talking about it, and truly, if you are out there and you can resonate with this, that south node in Capricorn is very like, get it together, you just grin and bear it and you make it through, right? It's very heavy, kind of responsible energy because we had to be in charge. We had to do stuff and just get it done. So it's, growing into this other energy that is this softening. It's kind of this more motherly kind of energy that is just a bit more gentle and a bit more opening is definitely a ride. What's been your experience with that, just in your life and in the transit right now?
With the Capricorn Cancer axis?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, at least in my chart and my nodal story, of course, we have to take into consideration the house it's in and the planets it's in aspect to. Of course, mine and yours is an aspect, in hard aspect, to Saturn and Pluto. There's some oppressive planets. Of course, those two planets we've been getting to know really well all throughout 2019 and into 2020 here, that Saturn Pluto conjunction that we've been dealing with. And it's pretty heavy energy, as we've all been feeling. But to have that in your past life story, it's like, oh, great. When I saw that, I was like, it all makes sense now. No wonder I'm so messed up.
It's true.
But yeah, for me, it was kind of a duty and responsibility over the course of the life, unending, oppressive sort of responsibility. Kind of feels like the wound of the slave. I don't really think it was literal slavery, I think, because there's a lot of family dynamics. So for me, it was like slave to the family. And that key question I posed earlier when looking at the nodal structure is, what did it feel like to be me? Well, Capricorn isn't always good at feeling,
Right.
It's an earth sign. Yeah. Cancer, on the other end, is about feeling, which leads us to the medicine. But, Capricorn likes to suck it up,
Yeah.
Push the pain body aside, cry later sort of stuff. So the implication is there's probably tears that I was afraid to cry in the last life, a calcification in my ability to feel. Therefore, reaching the Cancer North Node serves as the antidote for that. So shedding those unshed tears.
Yeah.
So that's been my
got
personal journey with it.
Yeah, and I think that mine has been relatively similar, which I think is neat because we do have a question. Somebody was asking about how does the sign and the house put an impact on the node? Do you want to grab that one?
Yeah, the sign is more psychological, more motivational, and that's where I try to pinpoint what did it feel like to be you. And then the house is more where it played out in your life. So, for example, I just talked about Capricorn and the emotional tendencies with that, at least on the dark side of it. Because it's also important to point out that every front has a back. Okay, there's a light, positive manifestation of everything and a dark manifestation of everything as we live in this world of duality. So there's a stark juxtaposition between light and dark. And of course, in the past life story, we want to try to look to the bad habits or at least the stumbling blocks of that sign. So in the past life story, when looking at the South Node, we want to look at it a little bit more negatively or a bit askance. There's some wonderful things about Capricorn, but that's why I was looking at it a little bit more negatively, just to make that clear. But the sixth house where it's located, house of service, house of work, wage slavery, So with Capricorn sixth house combination, it kind of feels like dragging the plow through the mud, And of course, planets and aspect to the node are going to color that too. But broadly speaking, the sign is more internal, psychological. The house is more external. Like, where is this internal wounding playing out on the external world?
Absolutely. And I also explain that too as so the node is telling us the what, right? It's the point that's telling us what is happening in your life, what we need to interpret there. The house tells us what's the dominion or the domain of life. And then the sign are the characteristics you're going to use to get that work done, or in the case of the South Node, what you did use before, and you will again because you know those. So you want to look to the sign qualities on the other side because that's kind of your toolkit. Those are your characteristics you're going to need to develop to be able to move yourself forward. And like Bryan said, we typically suck at them. They are hard. That North Node work it's hard work. Darn it. Right?
Yeah,
Good.
it takes relentless effort and force of will, but as long as you're compassionate with yourself in your own journey and recognize there's going to be some stumbling blocks away and on the way, and just keep on trucking, you'll get there. But it does take some considerable effort.
Yeah. So one of the things I found in my practice, and I don't know if you've found this yet or at all, but is that I feel like when people come and they're feeling off track and, career, love, whatever, what's my purpose? It doesn't matter really what the question is. By starting to look at the node first, I feel like whenever people feel off track, if they will go back to the qualities of that North node, they can start to kind of channel the qualities of that particular sign in that area, and things start to kind of click back in place. Like they start to make a little bit more sense, no matter what the question is. Well, I don't know. What's your experience with that?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I can see how that's the case. I never really thought about it exactly that way, but if you think about it, the south node, north node, you can kind of think of it as like a track, that you're driving along. And if we get thrown off course and we get distracted and go in different directions, you just get back on the track. Of course, free will trumps all, and we will make some detours, but it does give us a general direction to head in. And the more you do that, the more you grow, the more you evolve, and the more you can really embody the rest of your birth chart in a higher way.
Yeah.
Because you're on the fast track of growth by always, veering back to that polarity point.
Yeah. Yeah, that is my experience. So let's talk about these bad boys in transit, because unfortunately, right, we have these birth charts and there are little stamps of the sky, but then things moved on. It's not all about us, it turns out. So they transit, and it's neat because they're not actual bodies. They're points, they're calculated points. And when we kind of track the points, for anybody who cares about this, they kind of move like a snake. They're kind of windy up there in how we follow their orbit in relation to us on the earth. So it's kind of neat when you think about that. But either way, they transit and they move backwards, right? This is depending on which one you're using, but the ones we're going to call them the retrogrades. So they move backwards because it's an inside job, but they transit for us as in a global sphere as well. So what we've been experiencing are the transiting north and south nodes in both Cancer and Capricorn, the north node in Cancer, the south node in Capricorn. So in transit, the transiting energies bring events, they bring qualities, they bring new what's into our individual charts, and they stimulate our natal planets, which are the pieces of us that are asked to wake up and to respond. So as we've been experiencing these transiting nodes, one of the things I have consistently found is that where the transiting north node goes, we will achieve whatever those things are, which is an interesting thing because when I'm translating or I'm interpreting a chart, sometimes, with the aspects in between other transiting planets, it's like, it could manifest this way. But with those nodes, I'm like, nope. Cancer, we are going to move towards more feminine energy. We're going to move towards feelings. We're going to move towards nurturing, right? And we have done that. We have effectively done that for the last year and a half. So as they're transiting, they pull in an impact for us as well, but it's bigger. It's not only personal, right? Sorry, I get on a tangent about these. These are some of my faves.
No, that was good. Yeah, I'm in class right now.
I know.
Taking notes. I was like, oh, okay, So we're both learning from each other. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a good deal. So as we've experienced this globally, some of what this has really been like is truly from our positions of authority, from our positions of structures that we have had that have been in place for a very long time. We've needed to move, we've needed to grieve, we've needed to move, we've needed to ask some different questions. We've needed to see that we've got a whole other set of generation that needs to be nurtured differently. And so we've had this pull to do that. And I think most people have definitely been able to experience what that feels like, but not in the outer way. The big planets have shown us in a very outer way that we're going to do that. This is that internal call, I think, that most people in a global way have been awakened to, like something softer, right? emotions.
Yeah,
And
globally, I think we've been, for the last year and a half, especially been called to heal, you know,
Mm,
and what's really been showing strongly is because you got to, it's like, there's so much Capricorn going on. You know, you had the South Node going through Capricorn until, let's see here, November 2018. But it joined Saturn and Pluto that were already in Capricorn. And now we have Jupiter in Capricorn. So there's a lot of Capricorn going on. So what are we healing from? The Cancer, North Node. We're trying to heal from, let's say, the darker manifestations of Capricorn. And when we're talking about on a global level, at least the way I read it, is control, you know, control of people. You know, that's one of the darker manifestations of Capricorn, and, you know, dark ambition, the dark side of the patriarchy. So we're starting to break free from that through our own healing process. And I think when it hits the Gemini Sagittarius axis, we're going to hit a very kinetic blast of energy, because, you know, Sagittarius is a fire sign, Gemini's an air sign. So we're leaving the earth water axis, okay, into something more fiery and explosive. And what Sagittarius and Gemini has in common is a need for freedom, you know, freedom from the constraints of the dark side of, you know, the power structures of the world, you know, the deterioration of old structures and habits that are no longer serving humanity. So healing from that, and then blasting forth into a more freedom-seeking direction.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and we're going to see this actual move to that Gemini Sag axis. We start to feel the burn of it there in May, and I think we feel it solidly as we're in June, where that North Node will be in Gemini, that South Node will be in Sagittarius. And so it's also interesting that in everything we're learning, while they've been here in Cancer, Capricorn, in our personal lives, because that South Node says, please detach here. Please start to let this go. For so many of us, I feel like there have been projects or desires that we've wanted to work on, to make concrete in the world, right? To bring structure to, and we just haven't been able to do it because we've been thinking about it or going about it in a way that is far too structured. So now, as we've had Venus give us our first intro into some Gemini energy, and then the nodes follow, I think we get this beautiful space where that North Node says, here, learn about it. Let's teach about that. Let's talk about that differently. And let's detach from Sagittarian old ideas, old beliefs. Maybe this isn't the only way, because this is the trick, right? Mm-hmm. When people natally or in transit, I think that that Gemini North Node really has to practice asking other people for their input, right? They have to like ask and say, oh yeah, I'm not the only one talking here, right? And like, it's this interesting place where, because for so long that Sagittarian energy was the philosopher, was the guru. They had to know everything, right? And now it's not like that. So as we come into it globally, new light gets shown on, of course, everything that we do globally, from economics to everything else. But personally, we get a new vision of how we can take this old thing we've wanted to build and actualize it out there, but just in a different way. I think that's so gorgeous to be able to shed some of those preconceived ideas we've had about how even we had to live, right? Mm-hmm. And to question, why do I do what I do? Is it because someone gave it to me, or is it because it's what I believe, right? And then to go figure that out.
Beautifully said.
I think we're going to see a lot of teachers coming out too, though, because the other thing is with that South Node in Sag, this is the gatherer of truth and information. And you can only gather so long before you've got to come on up here and teach. You got to talk, you got to share. So I think we'll see teachers coming out all over the place, and online has opened that up brilliantly.
Yeah, both these symbols are about freedom, as I said, but they're also about learning, you know, at the core of them. It's like we have the great god Gemini and the great god Sagittarius. And let's say they both work for the newspaper, right? Yeah. If that were the case, Gemini would write the news, you know, it's like, tell me the truth, give me the truth, just the facts, ma'am, you know. And then Sagittarius would write the editorials. You know, it's not really news. It's Yahoo News. It's like facts with interpretation. It's like, what's going on here? What does this mean? So interpretive questions. Yeah. And it's, you know, when we look at this globally, you know, Gemini, it's the most curious sign in the zodiac. It's very exploratory. The shadow side of it is it can kind of flit about or spin in circles, you know, take the first course in college without ever taking the second. You know, that's the shadow side of of Gemini. Whereas Sagittarius, when they get their teeth in something, they're really passionate about learning. They're that fire sign. You know, they like to really dig deep into that meaning through the philosopher archetype that you invoked just a bit ago. But since we're looking at the Sagittarius South node that we're about to enter into, when we start to contemplate, okay, so we take the philosopher archetype and, okay, what are some of the more negative potentials of that? And we basically come up to a rigidity about belief systems, you know. Sagittarius is a very idealistic sign, okay? And on one hand, you can be so idealistic as to be no good to other people, you know. It's like only talking about things that are wrong with the world and never, you know, taking a stand and actually helping with the state of the world. You know, there's that negative potential, but there's also getting really hung up on your own belief system. So it's interesting. We're in this age of Aquarius here, you know, the rebel, the revolutionary. And I think we're both from the US, you know, the US was created through rebellion, and our ancestors are rebels. And I really feel like in some ways we've kind of lost our rebel spirit, because in some ways about the dark side of Capricorn, at least that's what was really shown to light in the last year and a half or so. So again, control, drunk on power, restriction, and really those power structures trying to control how we perceive reality. And that's a key understanding, because here we find Gemini, this beautiful North Node in Gemini, asking, just, you know, beckoning us to come that direction, okay? The Gemini, the sign of communication, the teacher, the storyteller. Of course, communication's a two-way street. So it is a communicative sign. It's ruled by Mercury. We already talked about that, you know. But underlying speech, communication is thought. Underlying thought is perception. At its core, Gemini is fundamentally the sign of perception. So in a way, because with opposite signs, every front has a back. It's the same side of the, you know, same side of the two sides of the same coin, rather. And they have that common ground of learning and freedom, but they just have different ways of going about it, as we've been discussing. Okay. But our medicine, Gemini, to the darker potentials of Sagittarius, which basically can be, as I was saying, passionate, closed-minded belief systems, is to attempt to be more Geminian, which is to say, perceive reality more clearly through facts and information. Yeah. So I see the next year and a half, starting in June, right, as a major paradigm shifter, maybe even a disclosure of truth. And lastly, I'll say, with belief can be a beautiful thing, but it can also be a dangerous thing. You know, Sagittarius, the believer, yeah. And we see people indoctrinated into faiths or beliefs or dogma. You know, the belief of being a Democrat, the belief of being a Republican, the belief of being an atheist, the belief of being a Christian, belief this, belief that. We can be dogmatic about many things. It doesn't have to be religion, literally. Yeah. So it does lead to closed-mindedness, and being indoctrinated by those faiths just feeds polarity consciousness, which the power structures really love. They love for us to be at odds with each other. And the insecurity of those beliefs is that for some of us, we feel like we need to convert others. You know, I'm a Sagittarius myself. Sometimes I feel like I'm on the soapbox and I gotta, you know, reel it back a little bit. So the danger in that also is we can fall into echo chambers, confirmation bias, become a little bit fanatic about it sometimes. Gemini serving as medicine against fanaticism, against our own ego-centered attachment to beliefs. So a collective as this affects the global scale, a collective shattering of certainty through an influx of information.
Mhm. Yeah, it's going to be, I think, I really think the year is going to be brilliant, but there is going to be adjustment to each of us personally. Uranus is also still in Taurus, so really shaking us out of our comfort zones already. But when you get shaken up to the surface, then you're exposed and there's information available, right? So it's like this little awakening in these places we've been stuck, and we're hanging out up there going, oh, I didn't know that, and we get to discover that. So the other thing that I think is important about that is because these two are going to come into their power time, that North Node in Gemini tells us we can keep an eye on Mercury over this next year and a half as well and see what he's doing. Now in 2020, we've got some more retrogrades of Mercury and they're in water signs, not to mention they really start making their way towards critical degree in May, and Venus will go retrograde at that time. So I do think for many of us, as well, we'll find ways to communicate emotionally. Water, Venus, what do I need for love? How do I express love? We're all pushed into quarantine now. You're getting to figure out what your partners, what your kids, what your house needs for love and value, and maybe even needing to speak that yourself. But I do think this next year will bring that up to the surface as well, especially during these Mercury retrogrades in water energies. We're going to talk about some stuff. We're going to have a retrograde in Scorpio. We're going to talk about some things that have been down there that have been scary. And I think the most scary thing that any of us ever address is that we're actually good at something, right? The thing that we're actually good at. It's like, oh crap, I really do know what I'm doing, right? And so I think some of that will come up, and some of those emotional fears will get sorted out, and then we get to use that and give it away and teach and talk, so we'll get to keep an eye on what Mercury is doing and showing us as well. So that'll be, and of course Jupiter's going to head on into Aquarius, so we're going to do some things online for sure.
Definitely. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, good. So should we talk about, real quick before we jump into these charts, let's talk about what happens when we get the natal nodes interacting with the transiting nodes, because these create little pockets of opportunity for us as well. Just like every other planet or point can have a return, so do these, but they also have an inversion and they also have a square, and they, so these are some of the big ones that we work with, and I think we'll let's talk about that. It's what I think. So when the transiting North Node is in the same sign as the one that it is in your natal chart, and it's by degree, not just sign, but by degree, you're going to have what's called a nodal return. Now, this happens about every 19 years, and it's an interesting point. I like to work with these a lot in my practice. So I love to see someone coming up to a nodal return because I know they're going to have an event, right? They're going to do something life-changing. You think about it, that first one we really kind of have is 18, 19 years old, and we get our first leap of real freedom. Now, regardless of what your home life has looked like, your country life has looked like, at 18, 19, we take some kind of leap to get away from or to do something different than where we were at, and then so we see something like that happen again for someone in like their 30s, and they're like, you know what? I just really need to be a tarot reader. I'm going to do it. Even if they take it on as a hobby, it's this like life-changing event that kind of rolls in, because it's almost like that transiting North Node bonks your natal North Node and is like, hey, do this. Go work on this. We need to be doing this. Get this done. So it's a full stimulation. But typically what happens first is we have a little bit of a freak out, because also the South nodes have met each other and they're like, oh my God, sit down, don't do it. It's too big, you know what I mean? So there's a little bit of work that happens, but after it, I feel like there's always an event that happens in this person's life. So I don't know if you have experience with that or how you work with them in that regard.
Yeah, pretty much exactly like you said. And I was just, when you were talking about 18 and 19, I was just thinking about when I was 18 and 19. And yeah, it's like, because we just talked about it, my North Node, just like you, is in Cancer. And so right around then, I had my nodal return, and yeah, events happening in the life. And the way I call it, and when I'm doing a reading for somebody, I said, the karmic wave is breaking in your life, you know. And if you go with the flow in the direction that the flow is flowing you towards, which will be pretty rapid. So resisting change is probably not a good idea. It will help you to take some of that karmic medicine, find more, you know, heal from the karmic wounds of the soul. And for me, because as I was saying, my past life story had a heavy duty slave to family sort of energy to it. When I was 18, the day I turned 18, I moved out of my house. I was gone. See you later. You know, and it reminds me of the Fool card from the Tarot deck. You know, the one that's the first card is actually labeled 00. It's a very Sagittarian card. And as I said, I'm a Sag, you know, it's like, it's the kid leaving the palace walls for the first time in his life. He's super excited. His eyes are on the horizon line. He's got his little knapsack, but he doesn't see the cliff he's about to fall over, you know. That was me when I was 18, my nodal return. I was the fool, you know. I couldn't get away from the family dynamic quick enough. It's not because my family was terrible or anything like that. It's just that the karmic wounds resonating. They're always there. The fingerprints on the murder weapon, so to speak, you know, is always there. It's like trying to get away from that, you know. It's like an instinct of, ooh, it's like when you're a kid and you touch the stove and it burns, you know not to touch the stove again, you know. So me wanting to get away from the family dynamic because it was Cancerian for me. It was, even though Cancer is the sign of family, but I guess leaving family could be a variation of that. But it felt so free, you know. There was deep healing there. And of course, my second nodal return, which we just experienced, both of us, I don't know what it was like for you, but it involved family for me again in a different way, except for I got married.
So did I.
Yeah. So, you know, the karmic wave was breaking in our life.
Yeah. And I think it's neat because we, you know, we talked a little bit about this, and really growing towards that north node side of the work. What obviously happened for both of us and many people who have that Cancerian north node is something softened, right? There was something that softened, and we were able to have an expression of that emotional body in a different way. And mine is in the 11th house, which it's funny because when we picked our date to get married, we just picked a date that we liked, and then I ran the dates for both my husband and I, and we were both having our nodal return on that date, which we couldn't have planned that, you know. It just was what it was.
Wow.
And we both, and my husband was like forever. We were friends for a very long time, and he always said, I don't want to get married. It's just a piece of paper. That's so dumb. You know, just all of this. And I was like, yeah, I'm good. We don't need to get married. I'm happy as a clam, right? And then we had a conversation, and now we're married. So it's just it's a softening that certainly I think happens in a very, you can't force it kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're all married.
Funny
Brilliant.
how that works out.
Yeah. All right.
It's better than the dark side, or not the dark side, but one of the archetypes with Capricorn is the hermit. So it's a good thing that we got married instead of, you know, going into self-sufficiency, suck it up mode, and I'm going to go off into my cave and be an old curmudgeon, you know. That's the karmic history sort of going on repeat, the skipping record. So it's actually a good indication, I think, that it worked out the way it did for us. Yeah,
I think so too. Yeah. Well, in my north or my south node being down there in the 5th house, I'm very me. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Right? Yeah. Like, I'm good. I'm happy. So to move to, oh, we could be happy. That's just a real breakthrough over here. So yes. So let's talk about if you're having a nodal square. Now, the square is not something I think is terrible. I actually think it's a very useful aspect because it's the 911 of our aspects. It says, I'm going to squish your face right into this little box and make you tense and tight until you take an action to relieve the tension, right? So it's calling you to action. But first, we don't do that. First, we get all squished in the box, and then we take action. So if you're in a nodal square, you're probably around 23, if you're doing your, it's not even your first one because you square really early, but significant ones that you maybe can remember are about 23. You'll do it again in your 30s, right? But what's happening here is that transiting north node is square your natal north node. So a square says adjust, adjust.
Exactly.
Something
Yeah.
is not right, right? And because remember, we're talking about the node placement, it's quiet. This one's quiet and it's on the inside. So you're kind of like, what is that, right? Like when you get an itchy tag, you're like, you got to do this for like 45 minutes before you reach back there and move it, right? So it's kind of that kind of feeling, but you feel like you're being pulled towards something that is not necessarily what you're doing currently. And what you are doing starts to feel like you're trapped. This is not the business. So as you're experiencing this nodal energy, you can know genuinely from an inside out kind of way, this is asking you to move towards something new or to move away from what is making you feel trapped. And the thing is in a square, you don't always know what that feeling is right away. I mean, is my experience, but this can be events as well. I had a client that I worked with where she was just feeling really stuck in this company that she worked with, and it was a mom and pop kind of place. And she's like, I just feel like I can't let them go because what are they going to do without me? She held a key position, and the owners died, and she didn't have that job anymore, right? And so it was not like the ideal situation in her 30s, but she said as soon as that happened, she felt free. And I'm like, yeah. And the adjustment starts to come up. Other examples, maybe you got to fix something in your house or in your world and you've been avoiding it. And then boom, an event happens and you're in it. And it creates this area of freedom. So that's my kind of experience with it. Your turn.
My turn. Pretty much the same. I mean, all aspects, require integration, whether it's an opposition or a square or a conjunction. I would still say the same thing. The karmic wave is breaking, but the square is I don't give it a bad reputation either. The word that I love that word adjustment. Actually, I might steal that if you don't mind. I don't know if you have.
Feel free. Not copyright.
I'll pay you royalties. Friction is the word I usually use. A friction-based aspect, and it's like, okay, the karmic wave is breaking, but it typically manifests in a more friction-oriented way, maybe a little bit more uncomfortable way, sometimes a more sudden way, like you just said. And the more easier aspects, the shadow side of them is to sleep through them, not take advantage of the evolutionary opportunity. But squares and oppositions tend to, more often than not, make their presence known in your life to give you that little bump or sometimes a big bump, but the goal is the same, still work on the karma. And, it's like, even if it does give you a big bump, rattles your chain, from the ego, that may not be the best news in the world, but from the soul's perspective, if that's why we're here, to learn, grow, and evolve, it's the best news in the world. A square, yes, because you're so positioned to pack so much real change into that given period of time. And also, it's like, how many times have we had something gnarly happen to us, right? And we perceive it as bad. 10 or 20 years later, looking back at it, we're like, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, Hindsight's 2020, so if you can kind of have that 30,000-foot view, even if the square ends up manifesting in more uncomfortable friction-based ways, if you can, in the moment, which is really hard, have this is the best thing that's ever happened to me, even though it might suck in the moment, your learning curve is accelerating. You're going faster up this very karmic continuum. So very similar. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about one last one, and then we're going to jump in and interpret some charts. And this is fun because we just picked charts. So it's not like we've had 2 days to prepare. So we're going to just do real live astrology for you guys, which I'm just so excited about. Okay. So let's say you're having an inverse nodal return, which means that the transiting north node is on top of your natal south node and vice versa. And so this can feel kind of cattywampus, but it's often this place where I think this is, you were talking about the seating, and I was thinking about a stadium, right? For a long time, we sit in our lives and we've got like field level seats, and it's like, oh my God, these are the best. And then you get an inverse nodal return happening, and you start moving up to the nosebleed sections, and you're looking down at the field, and you can see everything, past, present, and an idea of the future are all coming together, right? Because that transiting node sitting on your south node is like, that's not working. We've already done that, right? Let's consider maybe something else. Let's put some closure to that particular thing in that particular house, in that particular area. Let's finish up that business so that we can move on. It's a wonderful energy. And the thing about it that I like the most is that you are not in denial about it. You're like, yep, that is true. Because it's an awakening, I feel like, happens for people where you're no longer like, oh, I don't know if this relationship is, maybe it's gonna, those guys come back and have a conversation. It's like, we've already done this. We've dated the same person with 5 different same names. Let's move on. Let's put some closure. Let's do the work to see why we will not move away from that particular thing. Let's move. Let's go to a new country. Right? Like there's always this kind of event that happens there as well, where you just are ready to see things from a much different perspective in that inversion, which that's what an inversion does. If you've ever worked with Pluto energy, you know that Pluto is happy to invert you, flip you upside down so that you'll get a different perspective. So I love that like seating view, because from this inverse return, if you're having it, you've started to see your life, your behaviors, and all sorts of things from a different perspective, for sure, I think, is my experience.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I don't have too much more to add to that, actually. I love that. So I have the same exact philosophy and approach to it.
Yeah, well, good. Well, there we have it, friends. Wrap it up. Just kidding. All right. Bye. That was a good talk, everybody. So let's do this in actual practice. We put out the invitation for some people to throw us their chart information, and we just chose a couple of names at random. So we're going to pull them up and talk through these natal positions of the nodes, which ultimately what we're looking to reveal here is kind of what's the work, what's the real work, what are you really going for, and also illuminating what's the story, what did it feel like to be you, like Bryan was saying. And so how does that play out on your human stage right now? So Bryan's gonna pull up some charts, and we'll look over here with him, and I'll also be watching for some questions as well.
All right, so I'm gonna share my screen.
Hey.
Let me do this.
How are you guys doing out there? How's the information coming across? Is anybody like, yes, this is so my life? I know that that's what happens to me. It's so funny. One of the first times that Bryan and I ever met, we were talking through each other's nodes, and I feel like we were both just like, oh my God, that's the story. That's the truth. So it's so good when you sit with somebody and they can kind of reveal it for you. So, all right. So it looks like the first chart we've got is.
Hey, can you see it up there on the screen?
Oh, well, let's just see. Let me check the other screen and see if we can see it.
I shared the chart.
Yeah, hopefully we can, because I can't see my other screen. I feel good about it. You guys, if you can't see it, you just let me know. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to also pull up YouTube. I'm going to watch us live to make sure. You can tell we're coming towards the age of Aquarius, guys. We're learning right along with you. Yes, I can see your screen. So we're good.
Okay, lovely.
So we've got Michelle here. Thank you so much, all of you guys, for submitting your information. Unfortunately, we can't do astrology for the next 6 hours. I mean, we could, but we're not. So we just picked a couple at random. And it looks like here Michelle has got this natal north node at 18 degrees of Gemini, which will put that natal south node at 18 degrees of Sagittarius, which is so fun because we were just talking about the transits as well. So she's getting ready. She'll be coming into a nodal return as well. So there will be some eventing happening for Miss Michelle here after not too long in this next year and a half. But let's break this bad boy down. Let's get in here. Bryan, I'm going to let you start, and I'm going to answer some comments.
Sure, sounds good. Okay, so if you look at the inner ring there on the chart, you'll see numbers 1 through 12, and those are the houses. And the south node is the little horseshoe-shaped symbol down there in the third house. And you'll also notice there's a couple other planets in that third house as well. So that's the south node. I'm going to be reading this past life story. And again, this is meant to be a semi-fictional storyline, not meant to be taken literally. And if it was close to literal, it'd be a lucky shot on my part, but it should resonate with Michelle. We're going to take a look at a pretty complex set of symbols here, find out where the symbols overlap in meaning, creating themes, and then paste that storyline onto that archetypal matrix or framework. And as Stormie was saying, the south node's in Sagittarius in the third house. And I guess the universe really wants us to look at Sagittarius in the third house, or excuse me, Sagittarius and Gemini, which strongly correlate with the third house and the ninth house, because Gemini is the third sign of the zodiac, third house, third phase symbolism. Sagittarius, the ninth sign of the zodiac, and then ninth house, ninth phase. So third phase, ninth phase. We're getting a double dose here. And we can be quite certain that Michelle was a very Sagittarian individual in the last life. The Neptune is also in Sagittarius next to the south node. And always when I read the nodal structure, I always look to the planet that rules the south node sign to give us more window dressing on the story, which is Jupiter. Jupiter rules Sagittarius. So even if Jupiter was hiding off in some obscure corner of the chart, we'd have to pay close attention to it. But it's not. It's in a conjunction with the south node itself in the same sign. It's a little loose, about 9 degrees, but I would call that a conjunction, at least with the nodes. And it's also next to Uranus in Sagittarius. So we got 4 symbols here, all involved in the story, all in Sagittarius, and then the planet Jupiter in its own sign. And whenever a planet's in its own sign, it's really, really strong. So wow, Michelle, you were Sagittarian down to your toes in the last life. And I'm sure that you've carried that through to a certain degree in the current life as well. So the gypsy, the scholar, and the philosopher, those 3 archetypes were running up and down your spine in the previous incarnation. So the gypsy archetype, gypsies travel. Okay, so you probably covered a lot of miles in the last life, especially with it being in the third house, also linked to mobility, which I'll get to in a minute here. But it's a fearless embracing of the unknown, in this case, culturally or geographically. And then we have the scholar archetype, you know, the passionate mind. There's so much to learn, so little time. We're just getting a feeling for your nature in the last life. And then the philosopher, the intuitive function of asking the big questions like, what does it all mean? What is this all about? Are we alone? So what all 3 of those have in common, Gemini, the scholar, and the philosopher, is learning. I said that earlier. So you were so hungry to learn. And especially with it being in the third house, it's like you packed the experience of 12 lifetimes into one. And of course, that can be really fun, but it can be exhausting. So your soul probably ended that life a little tired. Now, that's stating those things for the most part very positively. I want to honor those qualities in you, okay? Your desire to wanting to align your behavior with cosmic principles and living life passionately. But as I said before, when looking at the south node, we want to look at the symbols a little bit more negatively, a little bit askance, just to see what went wrong for you in the last life, what it felt like to be you, and what you were learning. What was the core lesson plan? So the shadow side of Sagittarius, I said it before, is fixed set of belief systems. And again, we can have a very fixed set of belief systems on many different things, as I said, you know, being an atheist, being a scientist, being a Christian, etc. But I think we are looking at literal religion for you in the last life. And the reason for that is a couple of reasons. See, we're always, when analyzing the nodal structure, looking for as again, these pools of meaning, meaning all the symbols overlapping, kind of like a Venn diagram, creating a theme. And you have a theme here running through the story of spirituality. And I know that because Neptune's next to the south node. Neptune, the mystic, the god of the sea, which is a metaphor for the sea of consciousness. So yes, you're a preacher, perhaps, okay, but also a mystic. And also you have your moon in Pisces square the nodes as well. I'll talk more about square in a minute here, but Pisces, Neptune rules Pisces. Neptune's known as the mystic, the dreamer, and the poet, okay? So there's a strong dose of dedication to God, I think, quite literally for you in the last life. Now, let's talk about the third house a little bit, because this is an important ingredient. Third house deals with mobility, as I said, but it's the constant, immediate, and the emergent, okay? Things happening so fast. So your past life was defined by the constant, emergent, and the immediate. So there's a sense here for you in the last life of drinking from the fire hose. Yeah. Improvisation. All tactics, no strategy, no time for the big picture. I mean, you were thinking, big picture in a sense, because you were connected to God, probably studying scripture and stuff. But a lot of distractions in the life, okay? A lot of busyness, like busy, 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 then dead, so to speak. So we're looking at probably a very chaotic environment. So perhaps, just riffing on what we already said, the preacher archetype. Perhaps you were a well-known preacher in a very big, busy city. And there's that drinking from the fire hose. Probably had a big congregation in which you were speaking to. Now, there's the Uranus next to Jupiter. And Uranus is kind of the wild card in astrology. It represents raw individuality. So there's a zaniness to your character in the last life as well. You didn't fit into the more conventional paradigms of society. You didn't mind shaking up the apple cart from time to time in your belief systems and what it was you were speaking and teaching and preaching.
The unconventional teacher.
Sorry?
The unconventional teacher.
Absolutely. Unconventional teacher. Yeah. Ideas maybe a little bit out there. Now, out there compared to who? To the eye of the public, you were weird. And I don't mean to poke fun at you. That's kind of an inflammatory word. I'm weird. I like it, Weird or strange, again, inflammatory, but they only hold power in the eyes of certain beholders, meaning the mainstream, which is a good segue to where I was headed next. You have a couple planets, 3 in fact, square the south node. Remember that friction-based aspect as I described it earlier. And when looking at squares in the past life story, I look at it as what was at cross purposes with you in the last life? What was really vexing you in the last life? And we have a couple planets in the 11th house, Venus and Mars in Virgo in the 11th squaring you. 11th classically known as the house of friends. Okay. So we can use friends as a useful metaphor here for the group, for tribal consciousness. This is another vote for that third house thing of surrounded by many people, massive city, very busy, but getting sucked up into tribal consciousness, the herd instinct, which was at cross purposes with you, trying to get your own identity to be defined by that, but yet you were kind of, outside the mainstream, which can feel very alienating. What did it feel like to be you? It felt very alienating. You were passionate about what you believed, but you were also receiving a lot of pushback from the public at large, who was very Virgoan, since these planets are in Virgo, which tends to be its own earth sign, more on the conservative spectrum. Okay. Mm-hmm. Also a lot of conflict through the Mars, the war god, at cross purposes with you. Words that cut. Judgment is another side of Virgo. So receiving a lot of judgment from the public for what it is you simply believe to be true. And then you also have the moon in Pisces square the nodes. I said some things about it. It kind of builds on that mystic archetype. But this also suggests for you, Michelle, an opening psychically for you in the prior life. Neptune conjunct the south node Moon in Pisces square the south node. But yet it caused friction. It was kind of at cross purposes with you in a way, and we got to understand that. It's like, what happens if we open psychically faster than we can really handle?
Mhm.
Well, especially when it's in the fifth house, like the moon is, there can be a desire not to feel so intensely. And we begin to find ways to numb ourselves. And that's the shadow side of Pisces, is addiction, basically. Yeah. And here it is in the house of fun and pleasure. You know, it's kind of a, you know, can go south pretty quickly. You know, what was your addiction of choice? We simply don't know. Yeah. But because of your psychic sensitivity, because of, I mean, imagine being born on planet Earth with maximized sensitivity. Oh, look out, right? And we add to that, you bravely and strongly preaching your message to, by and large, a crowd that was very aggressive towards you and very destructive. And can that drive you to drink, you know, or whatever? Of course, you know. So maybe some vices were created. So my advice would be, if in this life, if you struggle with any addictions, yeah, and it doesn't have to be drinking or drugs, anything pleasurable and repeatable. You know, we can get drunk on our cell phones. You know, we can get drunk on video games. We can, you know, endlessly scroll on Instagram or Netflix binge. It's anything pleasurable and repeatable that helps us not to feel the pain anymore. So if you have any escapist behavior in your life, you know, the higher end expression of Pisces is meditation, spirituality. You're psychically attuned to the pain of this world with the Pisces moon in this life. You were in the last life. We know you kind of got led astray there. You are in this life too. You're psychically attuned to other people's pain. Half your stuff isn't even your own stuff. But meditation clears all that stuff out. So is it spirit or spirits? You know, that's kind of the question here, the polarity between the saint, the high end Pisces, and the drunk, the low end Pisces. And I'm not saying you have a problem with alcohol. You know, it's any way where we numb ourselves, as I was saying. And since it's square the south node, you can kind of see it as a skipped step towards reaching the north node. So therefore it's good. And of course, we want to keep our eye on the prize here, your karmic medicine, your north node, but we want to take a little detour through the square. It'll help you reach the north node. And spirituality, meditation, artistry, you're fundamentally an artist, whether you're a professional artist or not, doesn't matter. You're meant to respond aesthetically to life. I know that because you have a Libra rising, a Libra sun, and a Pisces moon in the fifth house. Wow, you're an artist. And I'm trying to resist the gravitational pull of your birth chart, but here I am. And following the path of the artist / mystic will help you reach your north node. Now, as what we were saying before, is your north node is not easy.
Yeah.
Most people never reach it because it's foreign, it's exotic, it's opposite from where we've come from karmically. So therefore, to reach it takes tremendous effort and force of will because, yeah, we all suck at it. And there's likely to be stumbling blocks like that detour through the fifth house, okay? But you can do it. You can turn those stumbling blocks into stepping stones towards a raising of your consciousness. And the north node is really where the rubber meets the road for you in this life, which is in Gemini in the 9th house. So we could say you kind of had a very fixed set of what you believed reality to be. You had a dedication to God. That's a beautiful thing. And I'm not beating you up for the dogma piece, okay? As I said, I suffered from that myself, so I'm compassionate here. Yeah. But there was we recognize, not to be negative about it, but just to see the certain blinders there. So Gemini, the sign of information. Now, information cures dogma. So therefore, in your life, synchronicity will attract experiences to you from cradle to grave that counter dogmatic belief. So what you need in this life, above all, is surprise, shock, you know, paradigm shifts. When in doubt, learn. Expose yourself to what's fresh, what's new. You pack the experience of many lifetimes into one in the last life. Well, you're called to do that again. Don't slow down. Yeah. Because Gemini and the ninth house, again, are very resonant with the archetypal field of third house and Sagittarius. So you need to keep on learning, saying yes to life. Yeah. But exposing yourself to what's fresh and have an open mind about it, because you're attempting to perceive reality more clearly. And here's another piece. Gemini, the sign of the voice, as I was saying before, sign of communication. Now, you might have been yakking a little bit of dogma, as I said, and that's really honorable because the culture didn't want to hear it, and yet you were still, you're passionate about it. That's a beautiful thing. But again, the information was not your own, learned from others, indoctrinated by that faith. Yeah. So to find your voice in this lifetime is to find your own voice. And to find your own voice, in order to do that, you need to have an open mind. So whatever I believe reality to be, it's not quite that, ... Whenever us finite humans try to conceptualize God or God consciousness, it turns from God to fantasy. It sure is fun to think about, but there's so much of this life that's about open-ended exploration and allowing your perception of reality to be much more malleable. And this is where we get into a little dangerous territory here, because we're entering the ninth house. And I say dangerous because it's classically known as the house of religion. So we notice that we got some complexity here. Yeah. You came from religion, yet you're going towards religion. So I'm going to say in air quotes, okay, you need a religion. And what that means is taking the time to think about what's really important. What do I stand for? In the last life, you were focused on God, right? And conveying that information to other people. But again, lifetime defined by the immediate and the emergent, no time for the big picture. What's going on out there in the larger backdrop of the world? So going on the philosophical quest, needing a broader perspective on life, supported strongly by metaphysical inquiry again, but to not get hung up on what your idea of God may be again. But also supported by education in general. Ninth house is known as the house of education, both formal and informal. Yeah. But learning to arrange your behavior again with cosmic principles, but treating it more like a quest. So travel, cross-cultural experience, expanding your horizon of perception beyond the tyranny of the immediate and the emergent. Okay. And experiencing more freedom, more wind in your sails. The solitary splendor of the eagle. And the more you do that, the more you put your personal growth and evolution into hyperdrive. So that's the perspective on Michelle's nodes through evolutionary astrology. There, Stormie, are you still there?
I'm still here. I'm just in class.
Oh.
I'm over here in class with the rest of us. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. And I think it was gorgeous. And the only other things that I was thinking about as you were talking is looking at the fact that she's also got some nice trine energy from that north node to this sun energy down here. And there's like this Libra feel. And I keep thinking about this idea that with a Gemini north node, we just don't trust what we have to say. We don't trust our voice in some way, shape, or form, right? So I feel like a piece of the work is going to be to learn the expression through relationship as well, right? Like in this last life with that south node, maybe there was this, you were just not traditional. So you were kind of in that persecuted under Virgos, like, that's not the right thing. You're not the right thing, and that makes you susceptible to feeling like you need to actually defend yourself from people. Like, you've got to have all of the answers. You've got to just know what you're doing and be in this crazy, hectic way of living and being pushed aside. And now you're kind of being called to get to know people. But this Saturn down here is also in Scorpio. So you are suspicious of them. because you're suspicious of you. I think still a little bit learning to trust your voice, trust what you know, trust what you have to say. And the beautiful part about that North Node in Gemini, Michelle, is that if you will just talk about what you've already learned and experienced in this life and speak that into relationships, not only do you find balance of being able to still maintain your own voice, but also get to know others, you'll give them life, right? Like you give them life because you can say, this was my experience, and then you get to hear back from them. That's the thing. North Node and Gemini, you can't be the only one talking, but you do need to talk for sure. And you've got a ton to share, because I'm sure you've seen and experienced some things um, that could give other people some freedom for sure, right? But that opportunity to kind of want to hide a little bit, or I think with that moon in Pisces, I see a lot of artistic creativity as well. But Leos are like, traditional Leo house is very big, so I think maybe you sing or maybe you dance or you do something like that, you use the body, but it's like, is that your expression? Or are you waiting for the approval of people around you to tell you that that is okay? So it's this interesting dynamic that I keep being pulled back to the need for actual relationship, to get to know people and speak into them, which would give you a little bit of a release, move you towards that work. And that's not comfortable, I think, all the time. That's my take, the short version.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, the trines act as a support
Yeah.
to reaching the North Node. They're like you can think of them as a helpful ally. And you can even think of the ruler of the North Node sign as a helpful ally, which is, Mercury. And there's Mercury right there in the trine. So double dose for ally, which points our attention right back to that, Libra first house structure.
Yeah.
And yeah, all about relationship. You said that beautifully, and connecting with people. And yeah, that could create the karmic story as I painted it.
Yeah.
Imagine what it feels like to feel so alienated because of just what you believe to be true, constant judgment from the public.
Yeah.
And it can create potentially some, let's say, more Libran passive aggressiveness, maybe, And part of what you're learning in this life, Michelle, especially with all this Libra in the first house, is learning to make really important decisions. I call the first house the house of enlightened selfishness. Yeah. And the more and more those decisions are in alignment with your North Node of freedom and learning and finding your own voice, the more you'll evolve. But the rub or the catch-22 is Libra sometimes struggle with making really tough decisions because you have a tolerance for paradox. You see both sides of everything. And the one negative side of Libra is getting caught in a stasis of fear of making the wrong decision. Yet you have this Libra structure in the first house of decisions, So medieval astrologers had an interesting image for one of the shadow sides for Libra, which was a perfectly healthy mule that starved to death equidistant between two troughs of oats,
Yeah.
So, getting caught in that stasis of fear. So you need to become more selfish, I don't think you have it in you, but even if you were to be more selfish, you get a C- on your report card, but that's better than an F, but you're looking to just, half me wants to do this, half me wants to do that. I don't know what to do. The right answer is probably the one that gives you more freedom, more learning, going on the philosophical quest. The wrong answer is probably giving into the power of other people, on some level. So that's just a little additive to that. But that first house strongly supports that North Node direction, as Stormie was saying.
Yeah. Well, and that Jupiter, I think, just on its own, even and with that Uranian energy, the way I always interpret Jupiter in someone's chart is that you come in and you are innately given some level of wisdom, but Jupiter does not allow us to just keep it. He says, you have that. Now I need you to take it out, because Jupiter wants you to expand. So literally right here next to your South Node, whatever you have learned, whatever you've been through, this again supports that Jupiter's like, go teach, go travel that out, go expand that away from you, right? And in the third house, this is definitely, I would imagine that you genuinely have a lot to teach or have to share, but you've probably been feeling too afraid to say it, is I think when I boil it all down, I think that's where we're going to come to. So let's see. I'm going to find Michelle real quick and let's see if we get any confirmation. Either that or she's going to be like, you're both crazy, get off the internet, which is fine too, right?
You must have had the birth time wrong.
Right. Oh, look. Okay. So here's what we have in the fallout for us. You guys have probably been seeing this, but so Michelle said she comes from a line of gypsies. So we've got the untraditional teacher there. She has been on stage since she was 4 performing. Oh, yep. Absolutely worried about being vocal with experiences and decision making and completely suspicious of all other people. Brilliant. So I think we get to keep our jobs.
Yeah, that's good.
Which is a good deal. So what do you guys think? Should we do one more? I think Bryan, how you doing over there? How are you doing?
I'm good. I can
Good.
do this all day. I'm kind of a nerd with astrology. I love playing with the symbols, and it's fun for me. So hey, I'm ready if you are.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's pull up
Okay.
one more and we'll see what we see. How are you guys doing out there? Hopefully you're learning a little something. I always feel like when I listen to someone else teach, I just feel like I get captivated, almost like I'm a little bit awestruck. I'm like, so that's kind of how I feel for the moment. So let's do one more and see what we get and who we get to meet. And Michelle, hopefully this was helpful to you. Oh yeah, there she is. Yay, on point. We're on point, Bryan. We can stay.
All right. Good.
So let's see who we're going to meet next.
All right. I think I had to, okay. I reshared there. So we should be on Lindsay's chart.
Okay. Yep, I think we're good to go. So it looks like
Surprise. South node in the 9th house.
That's the theme. We are going to talk about Gemini Sag. Like we're going to bring it in one way or the other, right?
I'll try not to repeat myself too much.
This one's kind of neat though, I think, because truly the qualities are going to be a little bit different. And this speaks to, I think, the question that was asked about, how do the signs specifically start to change how this is coming out or how it's interpreted? Well, we've got the same kind of housing focus here. This Aries and Libra business is going to do this a little bit differently. With that South Node in Libra, this is a very we chart, and this person is learning to be some me. So let's jump in here. You ready?
Okay, excellent. Yeah. I'm ready. Okay. So Lindsay's, if you look at the inner ring there and look for number 9, that's where we find the South Node. So it's in Libra and the 9th house. So of course there'll be much more before we're done, but that's our starting line. And this is kind of just carrying the ball from where I was just kind of talking about, which was Libra. I was just talking about Libra. And Libra, ruled by Venus, the goddess of love, and we'll have some things to say about her too. Libra, the lover. So it's fundamentally, as Stormie was saying, a relationship sign. So there was an instinct in you, Lindsay, in the last life, might have carried this through strong into the current life too, to build and maintain the bridge of rapport with other people. In other words, you were very likable. And again, you might have fallen into the trap of a little bit passive aggressive behavior because when looking at the South Node, we want to look at it a little bit darker. It's like, okay, where does Libra trip up on itself? I already talked about the indecision. That could have been part of it, but this time I want to focus more on the relationship because that's more of the focus of this reading. So the desire in you always to maintain that bridge of rapport, leading to potentially sacrificing some of your own nature, that passive aggressive energy. The danger can be a fear of dynamiting the bridge of rapport with people. And the way I like to put it is too much yes, dear in the life, yes, dear, yes, dear. Now, obviously, when I say yes, dear, that's a reference to relationship, which I do think for other reasons, this is a major component of the story. But even that phrase, too much yes, dear, we can really look across the board in your past life. Okay, too much yes during the life to many different people, probably family too, as we'll see. Now, falling too much into that habit over a lifetime leads to resentment.
Mm.
So what did it feel like to be you? Eventually, probably some resentment there. Okay, some bitterness regarding other people with whom you were close to in the last life. Now, the ninth house. See, this is an interesting thing because I just talked a lot about Sagittarius, the ninth sign. Here we have the ninth house again. So ninth phase symbolism. The universe wants us to really get down this ninth phase. And Sag and ninth house are not completely interchangeable. Okay, but there is a lot of overlap in meaning. Yeah. And based on a few reasons here, I think we are looking at religion on some level again, but it has much different texture. But with South Node in the ninth house, I believe you were in a circumstance where you were expected to have all the answers. This preacher archetype is really emphasized here. Okay. But it was less of like Michelle, like the zany gypsy, just shooting it out there. It was more cordial. It was more prim. It was more Libran, more nice. Yeah. More connective. Probably didn't rub too many people wrong, unlike the last story. Now, to gain even more insight about this story, is we want to look to Venus, as I said, the planet that rules Libra. And this turns our attention to the seventh house. So we have Venus is in Leo. It's next to the sun in Leo. And they're in the seventh house of marriage. Now, Leo, let's start with Leo, the king of the beasts. Okay, so king energy, queen energy. Probably born into some sort of aristocratic family, the upper crust of society, maybe literal royalty, so born into privilege. And I think as souls, sometimes we elect to be born into privilege just to see how we handle it, because, of course, all that glitters is not gold, but, it can distract us from our path, set us up for those very specific, based on that environment you were born, those very specific subset of challenges. And one of those challenges is being born into that sort of family dynamic is your life was really fraught with expectations about what is proper behavior for you. And did you buck the system? No. Libra, cordiality, primness, leading to that resentment. So, we'll leave you female in this story because a lot of Libra and, Venusian energy here. So born into this family, it's like you're going to wear these shiny black shoes. You're going to wear this dress. You're going to take dance lessons from age 4 on. This is how you talk like a proper lady. This is, we're going to stuff you in this corset, at age 13 or whatever. It's like expectations about what is proper behavior. Being groomed is what comes to mind here. Being groomed. And the sun here, this is a strong sun. It's in its own sign of Leo.
Happily.
Sun is the king of the sky. Leo's the king of the beast. So another vote for king energy here. Now, the sun is the biggest body in the solar system. It's got a lot of weight to it. So sheer gravitas. So what kind of family? A power family. The sun represents temporal, worldly power. So the rich power family, maybe even literally a royal family. Can you imagine the challenges of being born into a royal family? Being, stuffed in a very particular pathway, even if it's probably different from the pathway you wanted to go in. With South Node in the South Node in the ninth house, you probably wanted to be free as a bird, and travel. But no, that's not what you got. You got marriage. Now, now, it's not to say you didn't want marriage, but the implication here is that it might have been chosen for you. Right. Arranged marriage isn't such a common thing anymore, but it certainly was in previous, centuries. So arranged marriage. Now, you also have Neptune in Capricorn in the 12th house, squaring the south node. Again, squares are what was at cross purposes with you in the last life, what was vexing you. And here we have Neptune again, the mystic in the 12th house of consciousness, of monastic life. But unlike the last story, which was a more zany version of spirituality, what was at cross purposes with you was the flip side of the spectrum. Capricorn, strict, Catholic, royal upbringing is what this feels like to me. You know, sending you to Catholic high school, you know, and this fits with that same structure of being groomed and your life being defined by your relationship within the family, but certainly your marriage. You know, the ruler in that 7th house, under the thumb of marriage, defined by your partner. So deep relationship karma here. And I think that 9th house, we circle back to that preacher archetype, you know, position where you're expected to have all the right answers from whatever the power family believes to be truth, whatever, doesn't have to be Catholic God, but it does fit this symbolism pretty strongly, whatever the, you know, Catholicism believes to be true. So we're still dealing with fixed ideologies on some level here, but it was more spoon-fed to you, okay, instead of adopted on your own volition. Now, the karmic medicine is the North Node, and it's in Aries in the 3rd house. And 3rd house, again, very similar to the 3rd sign of Gemini. A lot of overlap in meaning. So you had the answers in the last life. What you need in this life is questions to subvert the answer. So mantra for the anti-preacher archetype is, oh, damned if I know, you know, to be naked and to live in your uncertainty. Notice the similarity there with Gemini. Also, another way this can play out, I've seen it a lot, is North Node in the 3rd house. There seems to be, with the South Node in the 9th house, some unresolved karma related to a location. You know, I'm living in Portugal now, and we visited this place called Sintra, this palace, the old palace. Beautiful place, way up on a hill. And I believe the royalty here in Portugal were Catholic. And they had a chapel there on the ground. So I just have this vision of you on your knees in the chapel and vigil, you know. So the idea with South Node in the 9th house, maybe needing to revisit someplace geographically to resolve that karma of that particular place. So let's say you were in Sintra in Portugal on the knees in chapel, living in that little palace your whole life, returning to that place. Obviously, I'm not saying it's that place specifically, but just using the imagery here. So the resolution of some karma linked to some geography. Now, the Aries is really the juice here. The opposite of Libra. Aries, the warrior. So your medicine in this lifetime is to become more warrior-like, more action-oriented, more assertive. Not the Libra who's, you know, passive aggressiveness leading to resentment, indecision, stuff like that. That shadow side of Libras. We look at the South Node through the shadow side. And the positive side is, you know, Aries is like, the hell with passive aggressive behavior. Dude, I'm just going to charge into battle, and I'm going to act first and ask questions later. Mm-hmm. And screw your conditioning. I'm not going to be groomed this lifetime. Yeah. It's about the right use of force. It's about directness. The last life, you're the biggest, you know, or no, what was the line I said? Oh yeah, too much yes dear in the life. Well, here's the Aries equivalent or opposite of that. So let's say you're in a relationship, since we're talking about relationship karma, and you're with a partner who's a slob. You know, sure you've been, you know, seen some of those before in your life. We all have, and they can't pick up their underwear. you know. Here's the C minus version of the use of force. You're the biggest pig in the universe, you know. Yeah, you still get a C minus on your report card. The A version, the right use of force, is being assertive and asking them to please pick up their underwear. Obviously, I'm being a little silly here. But being more assertive and fiery and passionate with people in your life, with relationships in your life. Also, North Node in Aries in the third house has a feeling of freedom to it. You know, third house does. All fire signs do on some level. Aries definitely likes to feel free. It's one of the most independent signs in the zodiac. So you're seeking more independence. In this life, you have a moon in Sagittarius, another freedom-seeking sign. So you have a lot of relationship. You're trying to get back on the horse that threw you in this life. 4 planets, one of which the sun in relationship-oriented planets. Jupiter in the 4th house of family. So you got half of your evolution in this life is tied up in family dynamics or relationship dynamics yet again. But those relationships, you are learning to cultivate more interdependent relationships instead of codependent ones. So it's a requirement that you feel free across the board in your life, but especially in relationship. And to live life like an adventure, you know, leave those palace walls of Sintra like the Fool card I was talking about earlier and go on the warrior's quest. And we could even say something similar as the last reading is to find your voice. Yeah, third house of communication as well. That's one layer of it. And when you find your voice, your true voice, it's Aryan. It's the voice of fire. It convinces, it's exhortative. It doesn't hide, it leaps into battle. So the more you live life like an adventure, the more you face your fears to evoke courage, which is the core evolutionary path of a warrior, the more you find balance between the polarity between Libra and Aries. The past life, the teeter-totter was more on the Aries, or excuse me, the Libra spectrum. Now you're trying to get more Aries so you can get that nice balance point between the two. You're good in the Libra department. You got your PhD in Libra in the last life. In this life, you're getting your PhD in Aries. And the more you do that, the faster you grow and evolve.
That is good stuff. So I have this vision of Lindsay, right? Being in her past life, she is the behind the scenes, like secretary, manager person, right? She's just always adjusting to make sure everybody has what they need, right? And there's some motive in there as well, right? Because Libra is smart and intentional. They're like, well, hold on, if I'm going to partner with you, it's because it does serve a purpose for me as well. So she's like, if you do well and your makeup looks good, I'm going to do well. We'll all come up together. But she gets shucked somewhere in there, right? Because the boss starts to bang the secretary and Lindsay gets kicked out, right? And now what does Lindsay do, right? And so in this life, while she's down there at this Aries North Node, I think Lindsay's saying a lot of no. Nope, I don't want to do that. She's got a Leo sun. She's got that Venus that's also over there in Leo and Mars, right? This is a full embodied moment where Lindsay's like, I don't want to do that. This is getting serious. Let's back out a little bit here, right? Nah, I'm not really interested in that. Yeah, well, it might be cool to meet somebody on a trip someplace, but let's not get too heavy, right? And I was also thinking about this Neptune and Capricorn, which is one of my favorite placements for forgiveness, right? Because Neptune and Capricorn is like, I absolutely forgive you, provided you understand what you did wrong, right? Like, we got to be practical here. Everybody needs to know what happened. So I feel like in this lifetime, as she owns this, Lindsay is not pulling too many punches once she embodies this kind of Aries energy in there. Because what she wants to be seen and recognized for is sharing something big out there. But you can't do that if you're hiding. It's almost this place where it's like, yes, participate with other people, but don't hide. You've got a Jupiter in Aries. It is about you. This is about you and your voice and putting it out there. So I feel like as she gravitates and grabs that, I just feel like Lindsay has the word no readily available for a lot of situations in her life today. Once she's in that real expression of it, which is beautiful, because it's also that place where she's like, unless I want to, I'm not going to marry you. I'm not going to be in business with you, right? Because now the grooming is still there. You do still have that as a beautiful piece of you. You do know how to people, you do know how to collaborate, but not if it's not right for you anymore, which I think is brilliant. I think is brilliant, especially because the ruling planet of that North Node is in fire as well. So your ability to say no, I just feel like is so abundant and it's so good for you. So if you're not using no, you should. Let's do it. Let's use no like a lot more.
Yeah, and this is why the nodes are so important, because if we were to just remove the nodes from the chart and just look at the birth chart, we'd think, oh my God, Lindsay's hell on wheels. She's got all this fire sign. She's got Mars and a fire sign on next to the sun in a fire sign. Of course, moon in Sagittarius, another fire sign next to Saturn there. She also has Pluto and Scorpio in the 10th house. That's a whole nother ball of wax. But, it's pretty juicy. It's pretty charged energy. But then we get the perspective of where she came from. And it gives us some understanding as to why she's so fiery in this life. It's like, tipping back from one extreme to the other. Yeah. And she probably still has some of those Libra qualities in her. She has Venus on the sun in this life too. So she has this interesting dynamic of Libra Venusian energy, but also with this fire action energy. But there seems to be an emphasis on the Aries, facing your fears to evoke courage, being more assertive, saying no. I really loved what you were saying about that.
Yeah.
And completing the trine, the grand trine rather, because the grand trine is when you have all three fire signs within aspect to each other, creating a big blue triangle in the middle of your chart, which you can probably see there in the center of the chart, the grand trine. But the grand trine does not get activated in her life until she masters Aries,
Right.
third house. And when she does, when she finds her voice of fire and knows how to use the right use of force, especially in her relationships, closely bonded relationships, also family as well, look out. Once she completes the grand trine, the skies are the limits.
Yeah. With that North Node, just getting enough of the interaction there with Mars as well. I have this vision for you, Lindsay, that it's like if you have a partner come into your life and they are as equally powerful or fiery as you are, I'm almost seeing like fame or famous, or they have something about them that's famous. If they want you to mold, if they start this molding business, you're going to break free. You're going to break free because you're not going to want to be put in a position to be quiet. It's more of that, nope, I'm going to be with you, but it's going to look a certain way. So I feel like when there's this like traditional molding that starts to come around, Lindsay is game out, So really interesting. So let's see. Let me go to the old phone here, since this is where I'm YouTubing us, and let's see what Lindsay has had to say. Yep, she has definitely needed to learn to say no more graciously. Yeah, because like no, when you're practicing these nodes, usually like you go really far one direction. You know what I mean? It's my experience where it's like, oh, I'm all of this quality. And then it's like, let's balance that out. Maybe no, but nicely no, you know?
But that's still good if she says no, period. But yeah, it's all about the right use of force.
Right. Well, and she's still wafted, remember, because she's been taught, she knows how to people. But I think even Libras get irritated sometimes and they're like, no, right? So every relationship I'm in that gets serious, I feel like I'm itching to get out because I'll be trapped. She loves underwear on the floor because it's a deal breaker for her. She's definitely done some traveling, 35 countries, and is still trying to find a place to call home.
Wow. Sounds like
Yay.
she needs some astrocartography.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know, Lindsay, if you haven't done or heard of astrocartography, truly that may be a helper to you. Our wandering souls, you know what I mean? I usually think that it's really useful because it kind of tells you where are your strongest lines at, especially depending on what you're trying to do at that point in your life. So, yay. Bryan, we have been doing some serious astrology for like a long time,
Yeah.
almost 2 hours,
That
which
was fun. Yeah, we're like, oh, it'll probably be an hour. But then I'm thinking, Mercury, we got strong Mercury. Let's double that, you know? That's what it'll actually be.
it's not going to be an hour. Yes. Good. Well, thank you so much for coming over. Thanks for doing charts with me. I hope you guys have enjoyed this immensely. It looks like in the chat, you guys have learned a little something. So definitely make sure you check out Bryan's channel. He's got a YouTube channel as well. And I think what's the newest or latest video that you have up right now?
The last video I did was actually a live guided meditation. I typically do 2 videos a month at least, once every new moon and every full moon, where I talk about the astrological weather through the lens of evolutionary astrology, what it means to us personally, what it means to us globally. And then what I've been doing is I'm also a meditation teacher. So I've been doing guided meditations at the end of those videos. So for those of you who love, the theory and analysis, the astrology piece of it, there's that. But those of you who like meditating, there's that too. But the last video was just me kind of channeling a little bit, I guess you could say, just kind of, riffing with the chat and then doing a guided meditation. But I'll be releasing a new video on Monday,
Brilliant.
for the upcoming lunar cycle. So
yeah, brilliant. Well, make sure you guys hop over, check out Bryan's work as well. And it's fun because, again, I just think it's neat that you get to experience Mercury in 2 really different ways, both of which are just like profound. I love listening to you, Bryan, because it is just, I am not listening to my Mercury. And I'm like, oh, look at it, slow, so detailed, so calm. So depending on what you're into, make sure you check us both out. It's going to be a good deal.
yeah, I'd love to do this again sometime. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I don't know, guys. Should we have Bryan back? Oh my God, they're gonna light up the chat. It's gonna be
Thumbs
good.
down, thumbs down.
Get out of here, get off the internet. Well, good. Thank you guys so much. We're gonna jump out of here, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I look forward to seeing you next time. Remember, you can still get signed up for the 65,000 subscriber gift. Bryan's links to not only his YouTube channel but also his website will be down below this video as soon as the feed is over, and we will see you guys throughout the weekend for the next talks. And next week we'll have Cameron Allen and Nadia Shaw here, so more learning will be happening, and Bryan, I'm sure, will be back for sure. So thanks you guys for having us, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.